Bonjour, hello and g'day. I'm Pauline from Pauline's Quilters World, and we're positioned in Australia, in Queensland, and we're delighted to partner with Carol and the Quiltmania team to bring to you part of the Brigitte Giblin wonderful box that they've put together. Wow, that quilt is just beautiful. But we're the people that provided the Sasher tool. This is the tool that we've provided for you to be able to make the bias that is on that beautiful quilt. So I just want to explain to you how to use this tool, how we cut our bias, and how easy it is. So we're going to use the bias Sasher ruler to cut the bias to start with, because like if we've got to go around tight curves, you want your fabric on the true bias. Sometimes when we cut fabric without the right ruler, we can be off the bias. So just a little demonstration. On the ruler, we have lots of diagonal lines. We've got lines running in one direction and then the lines running in the other direction. So when we're working on a piece of fabric like I have here, I've got a fat quarter out, I've got my right angle corner. I want to make sure these edges are straight. I'm going to position one of the lines on one side of the fat quarter and one of the other lines on the other side. So we're going to place the ruler down. We have this line here running straight along this straight edge and this line here running on this straight edge. Now we know we're on the true bias, because most of our rulers only have one 45-degree angle on them, and that's where we can get tricked up with the true bias. This way we know we're on the true bias. So I'm going to use, I love to use a little mini cutter because it doesn't stretch the fabric when I'm cutting, because the blade is so small. As the blade rotates, when we've got a bigger blade, I find it surges the fabric forward with the size of the rotation of the blade. Using a small one, we don't get that. So we'll just cut our first cut on the bias, and there we have it. Now we're going to use, in your box, you've got the 1/4 inch tool, and we do a lot of different sizes in our Sasher tool. So it's just like a bias maker. It's to make bias, but if you're going to do something on the straight grain, it runs through here fabulously as well. We do design the large packs where we have 10 different sizes. These are the most commonly used size. This one here is the 1/4 inch one. It's exactly the same as the one we've designed here, but we decided to do the one for the box in blue, so it was unique to the box. But we do design 20 different sizes in these tools. We call them the Sasher collection. Fabric will go through them on the straight grain or on the bias. They're fantastic for doing your binding for the edge of the quilt, for folding fabric, for any purpose. So now back to our fabric. I want to cut strips 1/2 inch wide, so I'm going to start with this line running parallel on the top edge of the fabric. This line here running down the side doesn't quite meet the side. So what I can do is I can cut, when I get down to here, I can stop, I can move the ruler and move so this line is running parallel on this edge, and then I know my fabric is on the true bias. But instead of stopping and moving the ruler, I find the best way to cut our bias is fold our fabric up into 4. So I'm going to take this straight edge here up to this straight edge. So I'm folding across the bias. So we'll go straight edge to straight edge. Now we could cut that if we wanted to, but I find folding again is a much quicker, neater cut. So we've now folded it over twice. We've got both straight edges laying down here, so all we have to do is put one of these straight lines on our ruler up against that edge. We want to go 1/2 inch wide. Now, if your fabric is a little bit flimsy and it's not a nice tightly woven fabric, you know, there's so many beautiful quality fabrics out there now. Some are a little bit finer than others. But if you've got a fine fabric, you may want to cut your fabric just a wee bit wider than the 1/2 inch. Because some fabrics that are not tightly woven, when you put a hot iron near them, they can shrink in a little bit. So this is a very tightly woven fabric, so I can go right onto the 1/2 inch line. But remember, if yours is loosely woven, go a little bit bigger. The line is running parallel down this straight edge. Now all I have to do is, I've got quick short cuts to cut all my, you know, it will possibly tell you in the pattern how many strips to cut, but it's such a simple process to cut your fabric on the nice bias. And then you have your nice long strips when you open it out. So it's very, very easy. Now to make our bias, what we do is we'll need an iron, obviously, and an ironing surface. So I'm just using my 3-in-1 workboard. We're going to lay our fabric out on your ironing surface with the wrong side facing up to you. We're going to fold both sides in till they meet in the middle. And it's a bit tricky here. You don't want to burn your fingers, just be careful. Just press about 1 inch just to keep that edge folded. Pick up your tool by the handle. There is a little handle on here. Pick it up by the handle. Turn your fabric so your fabric, the right side is facing up to you and the folded edge is facing down to your ironing surface. We come up from the bottom. We go back down through that hole. And that's exactly what that looks like. Just goes into that hole. Pull it through a little bit, and then we pin into the ironing surface. Now, you can pin with a normal pin or you can pin with 2 pins, but remember we've got a bias fabric here. The pin I prefer to use, and I'm just going to hope you can see this, this is the twin fork pin. It's a double pin, 2 prongs. I like this because when I pin into my ironing surface, because I'm pinning both sides in together, I get equal tension on the bias fabric and it's not going to stretch. So pin it in, bury the pin so the iron won't get caught on it. Then just hold the fabric so it's laying nice and straight towards you. You don't want to stretch the fabric because remember it is on the bias. I'm just going to turn this board a bit so you hopefully can pick this up a bit better. Just hold it, and I've got it off the ironing surface just a little bit with my fingers at this end, and then we just push with the iron. Just slowly push, and that just folds that fabric back in under on both sides perfectly for you, so you get your perfect bias. Let's go this way. And there you have your perfect bias folded over. So make as many of those strips as you want, and then you're ready to glue it in position. We'll just do another piece so we can show you how to join things in that. So we fold the ends in till they meet. And if they don't meet perfectly at this stage, don't worry, that can be a little bit of waste because it is a little bit fiddly. Just for you to get it right there. But, you know, like, it's just such a lovely technique, and I love the quilt that Brigitte's designed, and she is a very, very famous Australian designer, so we're very pleased to partner up with her in Quiltmania and present this tool to you. So we'd love to see on this Facebook group your quilts as they get made, because what I'm seeing so far is just brilliant. So there's another piece made. Now you can see I'm running the iron over it a couple of times because as you get used to using the tool, you'll move the iron along quite quickly and you may not get enough heat into the fabric to hold the fold, but there's the piece made, so it turns out absolutely perfect. Now, the next step is putting it in position. Now, in your box, I think you got a Soline quilt pen and you also got a little bottle of Roxanne glue. Love both those products. So there's 2 ways you can put your bias in place. So if this was our fabric that we need to put the bias on, if I'm using a glue pen, and this is not the Soline one, but it works exactly the same, wherever you want your bias to go, run a line and then just put this in place. Now, I like to heat set it as I go because I just find that the heat holds the glue in place. But just check your glue, iron over it first on a scrap of fabric to make sure that it does come out, because some don't. But there's our bias down ready to stitch. Whether you're hand stitched or whether you're machine stitching, it just holds it there beautifully for you. if I was going to put it down, and it comes off so easy, that's the nice thing if you have to reposition it. If I'm going to use the Roxanne glue, I think you've got a much smaller bottle. This is the big applicator, which is wonderful. Just put little dots of glue. Now the liquid glue holds your fabric firmer than what the glue pen does, but once again, iron that in place. And then it's there, ready to stitch down. And just use little bits of the liquid glue, of the Roxanne glue. If you use too much, it's going to be hard for your needle to pull through. So just those tiny dots, when you iron it in place, it spreads out and you only get a very fine film of it. Now, if you've got to join your bias for some reason, tidy this end off. The next end that you're going to join on, just tidy it off. Put a little bit of glue in place, whether it's the glue pen or the Roxanne glue, it makes no difference. Put a little bit of glue on the wrong side of the piece that you're going to add on, just a tiny little bit of glue, and fold this edge on a 45-degree angle. So just fold it on a 45-degree angle. The glue will hold it in place. If you wish to, you can press that with an iron to set it. Then we just lay it over the top of this piece that we already have there. Now I hope the camera can pick that up really, really close. This is where I've joined it here. That's the diagonal. Just iron it in place wherever you want it to go. Keep curving around wherever it needs to go to follow your pattern. Then when I'm stitching this down, I come back with a really good sharp pair of scissors and I just nick that edge off. And that tidies it up really beautifully. And that way you're not having to sew those two small strips together at your sewing machine or by hand, because I find that very, very tricky. So that's just some little tips on using the Sasha tool that we've provided in your kit. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope you'd have a look around our website. And our website is www.pqw.com.au. Or we do have a great YouTube channel that you might like to go to, because we do most of our quilts quilt as you go. If you see this quilt here on the table, you can see we've added bias here and we've added bias here. We've done some broderie purse here. But this quilt is a complete quilt as you go quilt. We quilted the fabric first, then we did the broderie purse with the bias. Then we made these two sashings up with the bias trim, and then we've joined it together. So we have lots of ways of doing our quilts quilt as you go. If you're a person that quilts on a little domestic machine and you can't quilt a whole big quilt through that little space on your machine, I really recommend you connect, and this is our Quilt As You Go handbook, which shows you all different ways of putting your quilts together, quilt as you go. And we use the Sasha collection to make all of our sashings. So when I made the sashing here, I used the 4-inch wide Sasha that we have as an individual item, and then I've used the 1/4-inch one to make all of this bias. This one here, I've used the 1/2-inch Sasha tool. So they do all sorts of things for us. So I'd like to thank Quilt Carol and the Quiltmania team and Brigitte Giblin for designing such a beautiful quilt, Brigitte, and for Carol for putting out such a fantastic magazine. It's just beautiful. So happy stitching and bye for now.